Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is October 20, 2024. Want to thank Rob Grant and his outstanding podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank Tamar Stever for introducing me to today's guest, Bill Pastor Part 2. How intriguing, Bill, to be back with you. Where in the heck you calling in from?
Washington, D.C.
Well, how cool is that? And again, I really appreciated reviewing part one. And as we were talking in the green room just before we started today, I was complimenting you on you telling me you liked my book, Strange Questions, but more so that no one's ever said, and it turned me on to the world of experimental film, not just the world of interviewing people. So I thank you for that. Yes.
Well, let me key off of that one. At brunch today, your book and experimental films came up in conversation because I told them about I had a podcast coming up with you, and you wrote this book on experimental films that really sort of opened my eyes to a lot of things. The whole idea of film without a narrative, and then you also start to get books without a narrative too. You get a lot of things without a narrative, but unless you sort of have that framework, that's what's going on, unless you have good insight, which turns out I don't, you just miss it. Whereas if you say, oh, I see what's going on, there's not a narrative, there's another sort of dimension we're looking at. So I'm very indebted to you and your book. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's just jump right off on that. And I wasn't intending to ask you this, but I will. Peter Greenaway is a great filmmaker. He said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. And so this is this phenomenon. I even talked to Werner Herzog about this, and everybody knows that pretty much everything we do is storytelling in a way, or we're going to get into the first human invention might be theater. Okay, it's recreating stuff. And maybe that's narrative, that's storytelling. And so you can watch an experimental film called The Flicker by Tony Conrad. It's a pioneer piece, and it's just black and white flickering on and off for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it could put you into an epileptic fit. He had to put a warning on it. And is that storytelling? Well, no, not per se. There's not necessarily a story told in the traditional sense of what narrative storytelling is, but me or you watching it might have a story go through our head. And so that's Andrew Noren, another great experimental filmmaker, said, if you put one frame, one image next to another image, that is narrative. Just like if you put one note next to another note, that becomes music. So it's funny, just your reaction to what you just said. Cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Any comment on that?
Well, if you expand the notion of storytelling to what you said, everything is storytelling, then I guess it is storytelling. How do I say? Sometimes things can just hit you emotionally without being part of a story.
Yeah.
So, for example, there was one. I don't want to mention names. In fact, I don't even want to give too much of a description of it. But I looked up a lot of the films that you mentioned in your book, and some of them did nothing for me, right? Which is fine. But I could see how another person, it would be actually quite moving.
Yeah.
And not insofar as it telling a story, that's sort of marginal, but it just related something to that person's life.
Yeah.
And so it was meaningful in that sense. Now, is that storytelling? I don't know. It's sort of like going off on a story. It's sort of a second level, a third level to a story. Like you can tell a story at one level, and then you start to ask, well, what does that mean? What does that say to me? And that's sort of a different level. And then there's a different level off of that. You can ask, what is its literary predecessors, and that's a different level. So yeah, it can expand way beyond storytelling. In fact, maybe that's probably what a good storytelling is, that it moves off of itself to something else. Yeah. I mean, otherwise you're just, I don't know, telling a story.
Yeah.
But if you're not saying what it means to you, it's literary roots. If you're not doing 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, you really haven't gotten too much out of it. Maybe I'm being too wrong-headed about it. I don't
No,
know.
no, I think Bill, everything you say is fine. It's that you're a thinker and you're integrating your emotions and feelings with your thinking. It's beautiful because this is where I'd like to go now is a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. When you're writing your book, what role does intention play in the creative process?
My book, in fact, I have a second one is just at the publisher, and a third one is in the works. I listened to the podcast, some of it just before this, the person who's a dancer.
Yeah.
And I think the other person was a musician or something. I could only listen to some of it because I'm doing errands and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And they're more creative. My stuff is sort of on the margin of being creative. Mine is like researched.
Yeah.
And I feel a little bad about that I'm not more creative. But you sort of take what you got. And I don't think I have that much creativity. I can research. So I feel a little bad about not being creative like these other people are. But as I say, so I'm sorry, I lost.
But
my
no, it's how we're defining the word creative. You still have to put words on paper, whether it's with a pen or a typewriter. Right. And then you gather, they reference their past musician influences and dancing influences. You're referencing the past researchers on Proust, on Joyce, on Wagner, and these different subjects. And so maybe it's more like this. Milan Kundera says, this is why I love writing, because that's what you're doing. You're writing.
Right.
You could call it research, but it's really putting words on paper. Right. This is why I love writing, because the character that I'm writing about can go further than I can. So I think that's interesting because that sounds romantic and poetic, because how can I write something on a piece of paper and then not go further?
Well, yeah, no, that's a nice quote. What I think I can do in the writing, this is what I've tried to do, is synthesize different things.
Yeah.
So in this one, I sent the Wagner book, Wagner, Joyce, Proust. I tried to synthesize, it did, Wagner's influence on these two other characters, artists, Joyce and Proust.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to other people about this, professionals, and that really hasn't been done that much.
Yeah.
So that's creative, I guess. I'm just finishing up just a book on Dante, which I never thought I would get involved with a Christian medieval poet. Yeah. That was like the furthest thing in my life. But I got into it. And so I don't think I saw this written by anybody else, because I've read a lot of books on it, a lot of things. And what I tried to do in that book was, so are you familiar with the Divine Comedy?
Oh, yeah. Not well, but I was in a reading group for a while and I should have stuck with it, but it just didn't work in my time. But yeah, I'm one of my main friends is deep into Dante and how he affected Joyce. But go ahead. Yeah, please elaborate. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting, because there are Joyce, of course, references in Ulysses, certainly. Sort of the exile thing. There's a line where Dante says, we started to separate Dante the poet versus Dante the artist, but they kind of intermingle a little. He says now he's exiled. Now I have to get used to walking up and down people's stairways and eating unsalted bread. And Joyce in Ulysses, he makes reference to that. So there definitely is a link. Where was I? Oh, so everybody makes a big deal out of Beatrice in the Divine Comedy, and she is important. She is sort of he used her as a stepping stone to do his thing. But my thesis is, and I maybe other people have said this, but I've read a lot of stuff on it. When it comes out, the bibliography is pretty big. that in the Inferno, he's investigating a world where love is absent. In the Purgatorio, he's looking at a world where love is trying to make a comeback. And in the Paradiso, he's looking for, well, what is this source of love? Where does it come from?
Yeah.
So it sort of has these three stages. And Beatrice, again, I just haven't seen this. Everybody makes it sound like the whole thing is moving towards Beatrice. It really isn't, because Beatrice is just human love. Now, wait a second, I got to say, I'm not religious, which is one of the reasons why how I got into this is a complete mystery to me. But in the text, he's looking for a source of love, and the source of love is the Christian God. That's where love emanates from. So Beatrice is just a human instantiation of that. How that will be received, I don't know. But anyway, by the one person.
What you're finding, Bill, I think, is like little gaps in the deep research that you reference, where, what about this? Why wasn't this happening? And I mean, that's like the same thing in the Joyce world. A friend that we work with, Tamar and I, Roy Benjamin, released a book on Joyce through the University of Florida Press, and there's like 90 books on Joyce they've put out. And so, that's a huge industry, and it's not industry meaning you're going to make a lot of money, but it's industry that people are putting their time in investigating. So, I mean, that's when you said Dante's third thing was the source of love. That's what my intention question is sort of about, is what's the source of the motive behind you investing a lot of time in this. So we talk a little about the Wagner book, and the third book is the Dante. What was the second book's intention?
Well, okay, the first book was the Wagner Joyce Proust book.
Yeah.
Okay. The second book is the Dante book, and that's
the second book is the Dante book.
And that's now at the publisher. Now, when I say at the publisher, that sounds pretty impressive. It's self-published, so yeah.
That's
and
right.
Go ahead.
The third, then the third one.
The third book is really esoteric. It's on time, like what is time? Time. And I give myself 3 years for each of these projects, and I'm on month 2 on what is time. And so the first step in the project was I created a folder in the computer called time. The second one is I went and bought a lot of books, and there are a lot of books on time.
Oh, yeah.
And now I've started to read them, digest them, and think about how I'm going to structure the book.
Yeah.
So people's concept of time has just really changed over time. And it is a very weird thing, because I've asked people, what do you think, what is time to you? What's time? And they give an answer, but not surprisingly, people who have thought about it, like Isaac Newton, Aristotle, St. Thomas, Augustine, Einstein, they put a lot of thought into it, and so their answers are much richer than one would first, than the layperson.
Yeah, but it's amazing because you have a sense of ESP there, because that's exactly one of the directions I wanted to go into. So it's appropriate we do this right now, because in Finnegan's Wake on page 12, he says, we may see and hear nothing. And one of our members, Decio, who's written books on Joyce, said, eye is space and ear is time. So it goes deeper. Here's in Joseph Conrad, and this is recently in the July in the Wall Street Journal, Jeffrey Myers wrote, Joseph Conrad's ambition, as he explained in his preface to his book about the ship Narcissus, was to recreate and intensify reality and, quote, by the power of the written word, to make you hear and to make you feel. It is before all to make you see that and no more. And it is everything. So it's this is the senses related? The question's kind of like, and it's just a prompt, you can go wherever you want. Is this senses related to us inventing these concept of what is space and what is time? Because they're going, the eye is space and the ear is time. Then there's a guy who wrote a book called Cannibal Joyce, and he says, well, Sean in Finnegan's Wake is eye, and Shem is ear, and the eye is space, and the ear is time. So then it actually goes right to Dante, and our colleague Duncan says Dante wants to eliminate time and space. He wants you to go to paradise and to go beyond time and space.
Yeah.
So there's many, I mean, I overloaded it, but and there's many things. Any thoughts on this? The eye is space and the ear is time. And what is the difference between time and space?
Yeah. No, all that stuff you read is really very cool. I guess that now when you said I, you're talking about the EYE.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
EYE. But isn't it funny how words in
Yeah.
one of my favorite lines from part one with you, Bill, is language games.
Yeah, sure.
When we're talking, unless there's a little type out, we got to be a little certain because it can get abstract because that's
Yeah.
what language is. Yeah.
Well, what I clicked into when you said that, because I have started writing, even though it's been 2 months, I've started writing. The eye is space and the ear is time makes really good sense. I'm looking down at because I scribbled that down.
Yeah.
Right. So one quality of, now this is starting to get pretty esoteric, I think. But anyway, one quality of space is that we can repeat where we've been. So I can walk into this room. So that's walking through space in one direction. Then I can turn around and walk backwards from the space where I came from.
Yeah.
So my eye can move around the same space. You can't do that with time. With time, time is one directional.
Yeah.
I have a memory, so my ear can only hear things sequentially. This is cool. I should put this in the book. Your ear can only hear things sequentially.
Yeah.
It can't go back in time, whereas your eye can go all around the room and back again and here and there, up and down, and it's looking at the same space. You can't look at the same time because that's now in the past. So your ear goes to the past with memory, or goes into the future with anticipation, but it's really stuck in the present, whereas your eye sees all the space.
Yeah. It's really good. And I mean, I will also recommend you going into McLuhan on acoustic space and his whole thing, because he learned everything he writes in his 22 books from two sources mainly, James Joyce and the symbolist poets.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
but here's really a great word you got to put in your book. It's the Incas, Pancha, Pacha.
Yeah.
They regard space and time as a single concept.
Right.
Pancha.
Well, that was what we're getting too much into the weeds here, but that was what. Okay, historically, space and time have been separated, two separate things.
Yeah.
Like I just said, you can walk around the same space. You can't walk around or hear around the same time. Time moves forward. Until you get to Einstein.
Yeah.
Whereas Einstein brought the two concepts together. It's space-time. You can't separate them. Yeah. But that's we're going into too much detail. Actually, we're going into a realm I have no idea what I'm talking about.
But that's what I like. You don't feel. I like to get in the weeds. We call it in funk music. We call it getting knee deep in the swamp muck.
Yeah. Well,
but
give me 3 more years.
Yeah, but here's. Let's go into Joyce a little, because I think your book's important.
Sure.
Encompassing Joyce, and I know you got deep into Ulysses, and that's important. And I know you've read other Joyce too, which I'm not well versed in. But in this realm of time and space with Joyce, this is a portrait of the artist as a young man. The first phase of apprehension is a bounding line drawn about the object to be apprehended. An
Okay.
aesthetic image is presented to us either in space or in time.
Hmm.
What is audible is presented in time. What is visible is presented in space. So there's Joyce laying out those sense,
Yeah.
the time is ear and space is eye right there, early on.
Right. You're picking hard stuff here.
Well, this is my question about Joyce. Just basically, what is your take when he calls something an epiphany in everydayness? I mean, you were constantly studying things, and once in a while you get a wow,
Yeah.
wow. You
Yeah.
have an epiphany. What is that to you? What did Joyce mean? What does it mean to you, epiphany in everydayness?
Well, to me, it's just a deeper level of understanding.
Yeah,
And it's a level of understanding. Now, this is for me that I have to be able to explain it to someone else. Otherwise, I think I'm BSing myself.
yeah,
Otherwise, I'm just think I understand it, but I really don't. When I can explain it to someone else, then I think, now I get it.
yeah,
So that's my epiphany. And actually, in quiet moments, for me, in quiet moments, I don't know if I ever have epiphany, but as we're using the term, I'm not that profound a person, but as we're using the term, I have epiphany during silent moments, and then I'll often like email it back to me if I'm out walking, so I can
right.
remember it. Um, but Joyce had. I'm thinking of Ulysses. He I think his big epiphany um, was when he was in the bar with. Now this goes back because I've been immersed with Dante and now with time. When he's in that bar with he's the Cyclops
Yeah,
in Homer's Ulysses, and he says what it's all about is love.
yeah,
I don't know if you remember that.
yeah,
I would say that was like um, Bloom's epiphany.
yeah.
He sort of saw that's the glue that should hold us together.
I
Um,
like
I'm
that's
sure I'm
good.
to think that,
No,
but
I like it. And I think it's important what you said, first of all, about being in a quiet moment, because Pascal said all of humanity's problems stem from the human's inability to sit quietly in a room alone.
mm,
So it is. We're both go-getters and we're always thinking and doing, but in order to really let everything down, sit quietly in a room, that's where you might have an epiphany. And the other thing you said really, someone just taught me something deeper about Harold Bloom. And see, I'm I'm much like you. I want to be able to understand something so that I can tell it to another person.
right.
In fact, this is Paul Schrader, great screenwriter and film director. He said, in order to, sell your film, you have to sit down with your friend and tell them the story in 15 minutes and keep their
Yes.
attention for
Right.
15 minutes. Then, if that succeeds and you write your screenplay, then you got to sit down the person for 90 minutes and tell them for 90 minutes and keep their attention. That's hard to keep someone's attention for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's very
The
good.
Harold, the Harold Bloom book, Anxiety of Influence, I just know about it. I haven't read it. And the one main catch line, and this is what I do, like I cheat am a charlatan in a way. What you're explaining, I can learn how to summarize books and make like I sound like I read it. And so, I mean, then someone will tell me something. So I said, well, Harold Bloom in Anxiety of Influences said, you absorb your influence,
Right.
then you abandon them.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, good luck, because what did Joyce do? He absorbed Dante, Shakespeare,
Yes.
Vico, and then he abandoned him? No, he referenced him and he transformed him and
Yes.
and expanded on them and all that. But this person the other day says, well, no, in the middle of what you're saying about Harold Bloom is you absorb your influence and then you get out of them what you think they're saying. And so, yeah, it's not necessarily everything that Harold Bloom was saying. It's what McLuhan called the user is the content. It's
Right.
like how you use it, how
Yeah.
Joyce used Dante, and then you abandon it. Well, the abandon things is idealistic. How do you abandon your influence?
Well,
But you want, yeah, go ahead.
I think that's the difference between a researcher and an artist.
Yeah,
A researcher should not abandon the influence, at least not in their footnotes,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Whereas an artist, they're kind of free to sort of just absorb things and tweak it, twist it,
yeah,
bend it to their liking.
yeah,
Which I think a researcher is sort of morally obligated, because otherwise you're kind of telling a lie.
yeah.
If you're a researcher and you say, this author said this, and if they didn't, that's kind of lying.
Yeah.
But if you're writing your own novel or your own painting or your own piece of music, then sure you can play around. I mean, that's what makes it creative, I think.
Well, Bill, there's a real heavy little conundrum there, and that's like McNamara in Fog of War says, I won, so I write the history book. So when McNamara died, it didn't say war criminal dies, it said war hero dies.
Yeah, well,
Well,
that's
so that's like who writes history? The researchers. And what kind of slant do they have? They have a creative slant too.
right.
Or as I have Stone nailed it. He said, "The truth as I see it."
Yeah. No, that is a big issue. I know that. Oh, our beliefs about the carpetbaggers and those people,
Yeah,
which is what I was taught, that they were these bad people, blah 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 blah. That came from these professors, racist professors in like early 1900s out of Columbia. They
yeah,
wrote the textbook on carpetbaggers, and since they were racist, whole generations have this misconception of
yeah.
uh, carpetbaggers. What were the other ones? I forget. But anyway, yeah. So that
But
was
that leads perfectly into this question, Bill, because it's one of your main people, Proust, and that is Proust's question on the back page of every Vanity Fair magazine. On what occasion do you lie? Because you pretty much insinuated, as a researcher, you're obliged not to lie.
right.
But then my question is from Marcel Proust: on what occasion do you lie?
Well, remember, Proust was writing a novel, so he was already into the creative process, I which sort of steps outside of truth and falsity. I
Right.
think. Um, so I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm drawing too rigid a line between doing a documentary and, because that's how it worked too. I don't know. I have to think about it.
Okay, but here's another funny thing. If you learn the difference between direct cinema and cinema verite in the documentary world, basically it's fly on the wall or fly in the soup.
Yeah.
So fly on the wall is you're observing.
Yes.
Fly in the soup is you're putting your act of observing into the documentation. Well, you can't ever separate it. We can't separate Bill and Bill's personality from his book on Dante, but you want it to be good, backed up research.
Right.
So that's good. So here's another one in explaining like the language game. This again is from Joyce, Portrait of an Artist. I will try to express myself in some mode of life or art as freely as I can and as wholly as I can, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use: silence, exile, and cunning. So I'm just curious your thoughts on those three words. What do they mean to you? What do you think they meant to Joyce? Silence, exile, and cunning.
Well, I think the exile is the easiest for Joyce,
Yeah.
because he needed to get away from, to, as best he could, have an objective view
Yeah.
of, in this case, Dublin.
Yeah.
Um, silence. I think he sort of had to silence, like, as a first approximation, his history in Dublin, to be able to again try to write, because he really thought he was writing. Well, that's why the Irish did not like him until they realized he could bring Ireland a lot of money, in tourism. Um, uh, so he needed, again, getting an objective perspective on Dublin. And cunning. Well, he sort of had to be a sly guy, because he wasn't doing just a documentary. He was creating a work of art.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little cunning on that. You have to step away, but then also shift things, hide things. So, for example, in Ulysses, each chapter is mirroring Homer's Odyssey. Part of that, and that's pretty good cunning.
Yeah.
Because he's sort of hiding the ball, but the ball's right there to see. So it's sort of cunning in thinking that, oh, I don't see it, I can't see it, but he's saying, look, just take a little look, and there it's right there.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the cunning part.
Yeah.
He's hiding it. He said, I'm going to keep them busy 100 years, these professors busy 100 years trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
That would be the cunning. But there's something there to figure out.
Yeah.
So that's the cunning.
Yeah. And then any thoughts on silence?
Yeah, I think he had to. I think he sort of had to silence, at least momentarily, his past, to be able to step outside. He sort of had to stop hearing his father. He had to stop hearing the Jesuits. I think they were Jesuits. He sort of had to stop hearing even his good friend who wanted to take out on a date. What's her face? I've forgotten her name. That's terrible. I want to say Molly, but it's not, the real character. So to get a little distance from that, you sort of have to silence those voices to create your own voice.
Yeah.
Because again, he's an artist. He changed names. So I guess that's what the silence would be.
That's good, because people don't usually say that, and I like that, because you added the silence of the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, the silent, so it can't haunt you too much. So there's another one I like to explore in the Joyce world. This is again from Portrait. Welcome, O life. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race.
Right.
So I'm curious, the two main things. What is forge the smithy of my soul, the uncreated conscience of my race? Any thoughts on those two?
Well, this is the Wagner roots to it, which Joyce was I believe, very consciously using Siegfried's words, forge a smithy of my soul. So he is going to recreate his soul, just like Siegfried in the opera Siegfried in The Ring. He has to rebuild the sword. So in the smithy of the sword, he grinds down the old sword that's broken and recreates it. So he's creating something new.
Yeah.
So that's very important for Joyce. He's creating something new. And the consciousness of his race, I must think he could have said that, well, the unconsciousness of my race.
Right. Now, why? I like that. Tell me.
Well, because these people none of the characters, except for Bloom, and Bloom only partly so, is sort of conscious of himself. They just sort of go about their day. Yeah. They're not really fully aware of themselves. And to become aware, you're sort of getting aware of your unconsciousness.
Yeah.
Your conscious life is just, you know, bopping around the streets of Dublin, or into the bars. It's your unconscious life, which is where reality really resides. And so he's trying to uncover that. And so again, the Cyclops chapter with the nationalist, that guy was just this big oblivious brute.
Yeah.
And he wasn't aware of anything.
Yeah.
And so if you just describe him, you kind of don't have much. You got a lot of garbage. But if you go into his unconscious, all the beliefs of, the old Irish language, the British colonial rule, which undergirds all of that guy's behavior and beliefs, you're getting into the unconsciousness of Irish history. Whereas that guy was oblivious to it. He was just a drunk. But yeah, he carries with him the whole history of British rule, them destroying the English, Irish language, the famines, the whole shebang. And that's all unconscious, almost like Jung's collective unconsciousness.
Amazing.
That's
you really, yeah, you touch so much there on things I want to delve into, because Steve Martin loves to quote David Mamet's kind of mantra.
Steve Martin, have you seen his TV series, Only Murder in the Building?
I have not seen it. Yeah.
Oh, it's worth seeing. Only Murder in the Building. It's a TV series. It's now on season 4. Half hour. Each show is half hour.
Yeah.
It's actually, and Steve Martin's in it. He wrote it. He helped write it. It's actually quite good. But I'm sorry for interrupting.
I appreciate the recommendation, because one of my favorite comedians is the other guy, Martin Short.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's the other guy.
Yeah, he's the other guy. Yeah.
So you know about it. Okay.
Yeah. But this is Steve Martin's quote that he loved to reiterate David Mamet's kind of mantra: art is a product of the unconscious mind. It's like, yeah, right. You're talking about awareness level. I often use this line. I go, your awareness level's in the gutter. You want people to be aware, but sometimes they're living in this subnebulous state. They're just like not there.
Right.
And so maybe they're daydreaming or whatever, but we want people to kind of be present and aware. But some people are just space cadets. In Maria Callas, I don't know if you've seen the trailer for the new Maria Callas film with Angela Jolie. It's an amazing 1-minute trailer, but she plays Maria Callas.
Mm-hmm.
I watched recently it's about 5 years old, a documentary on Maria Callas, which I highly recommend.
Yeah, I remember that.
I forgot about this quote I used by Maria Callas for years, and then I just forgot about it, and it came back. She said, in order to be a performer, you have to have half your mind in control and half of your mind out of control. Like, you got to find that middle space. It's like, what? How can you do that? I mean, when you're researching, you have to be in control and conscious, but you want your mind to wander a little so you can find some newness happening, or some new connection.
I'll give you a quick example of that, because this has been on my mind a lot.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, I started playing the piano.
Yeah.
And so I have a very good teacher and blah blah blah. And she has said many times to me, and she doesn't mean this as a criticism. She's saying you're not playing musically.
Yeah. Wow.
And I've asked, well, what is that? what is it that I'm missing? Okay. And then I went to a master's class the other day. A master's class is when you have a professional from that area. You in this case, you pay her a chunk of money, I guess.
Yeah.
And your best students have a half hour. They play a piece and then they get critiqued by the person. And the whole idea isn't that you get lots of compliments. You get ways to improve. I mean, because that's what you want to do. And interestingly, for two of the three people, she said, you have all of the notes. There's nothing to say about your proficiency. And they're playing hard pieces. These are people who have been playing since they were 3 or something.
Yeah.
But you're not playing musically. And then I told my teacher this, and she said, oh my God, that's the worst thing you can say to a musician. So what was fascinating with this person is when she would take a little phrase and play it how the person played it. And then she said, that's not musical. And then what was interesting, she would play, the 10 notes or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden it sounded musical.
Right.
There was something that she was doing. But what I found really fascinating was she was able to turn it on and off.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So her mind was not. Now she was giving instruction, so she had to be very present. But I don't know if when you play musically, you are as present as you are when you're playing just the notes. I'll have to ask my teacher this.
It's I think it's called feel. I've interviewed so many musicians and they go, don't think. And I'm like, yeah, right. Don't think. You got to think.
Yes.
You got to know something to your chops and technique,
Right.
but there's something deeper you want to tap into, and it's called impulse, intuition, feeling, emotion,
Right.
And again, it's like we discussed in one, you can't separate feeling from thought. We want to think we can because we invented the words. But to go on to Joyce, and this is funny because this is a time question. It is Ellman said, Richard Ellman, one of the greats of all of Joyce studies, said, we are trying to be contemporaries of Joyce. So we're trying to be, he's trying to explain two things, and I'm not sure which one, but I'm curious your thoughts of we're going back in time to experience what Joyce did to be able to write this, or we're time traveling because Joyce says this, and Frank Zappa re-emphasizes it many times. All times are happening now. It's called all at onceness. Who in the heck invented? There's a great Zappa song. He says, we invented the calendar to figure out how old we are so we could have birthday parties. Just your thoughts on that, that Ellman line, we're all trying to be, no, we're learning. The quote is, we're learning to be Joyce's contemporaries. That line in regards to his all times are happening now.
Okay, well, I guess I go back to, I don't know how I got into this, the researcher versus the artist.
Yeah.
So there's one sense that we want to go back into Joyce's time as researchers. We want to find out, all the references. We want to find out, because he has like 3 gazillion references to things. We want to be a scholar.
Yeah.
So we're going back in his time to do that.
Yeah.
However, the other way, going back in his time, is what was the other way? I know the other way was what in your quote.
Ellman says we're learning to be Joyce's contemporaries, and then I add, is this actually time traveling, as like you said, in a historical sense, or is it saying being aware that all times are happening now? It's called all at onceness.
Yeah. And that's the second way. So the first way is the researcher. That's the person who's the scholar. The second way is, like, there's something with these great writers, there's something universal. There's a lot that's universal about them.
Yeah.
They're talking about the human condition. They're talking about the unconscious. They're talking, well, I'll just leave it of the human condition.
Yeah.
And so that's how you're going back into their time to try to understand that. Like his relationship with Molly is probably, I would think a lot of people, well, even if a lot of people don't have that relationship, just understanding that relationship helps you understand interaction with other people.
Yeah.
These great artists, they're gateways into into the world.
Yeah.
You know,
That's Joyce's line, mistakes are portals to
yeah,
discovery.
yeah,
Gateways and portals are really good. And what you said also, Bill, evoked Martha Graham, which is almost the opposite. She said, great artists aren't ahead of their times, they are their times. So
well,
it's sort of like, is there a timelessness? Like what happened in Dante's book and what happened in Joyce's books? Is that universal and that applies to us at all times, or is it more exclusively for the people who lived then?
see, I think that goes back to the researcher versus the timelessness.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dante did meet. We'll just stay on Dante for a second. It could be anybody. He did meet Beatrice allegedly when she was 9. Maybe that's probably true. And that was a spot. He had some like experience of love. That's probably true. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just Dante making up a story to get his story going. His 2 stories going, the Vita Nuova and the
Yeah.
I personally think that it was just a device he used to get 2 good stories: the Vita Nuova, the first book, and Ulysses and the Divine Comedy. However, most of us, some of us, many of us, may have had that first experience of love, like, or something like that. Like I remember I had one with, she better not be listening to this, Dee Dee Matthews, Next Door Neighbor. I
Yeah.
was like 6 or 7. And those feelings have just stuck with me.
Yeah.
Now nothing came of it, with just weren't even weren't even remotely conscious beings. But so that was a similar experience that Dante had with Beatrice when he was 9.
Yeah.
And so that's the universality of it. The research is, well, did he really meet her? What effect did it have? His other poetry, was that really just he pasted a lot of previous poems together and made it look like it was all about Beatrice, whereas they just weren't. That's all the research stuff, which is cool. But the other one is the experience he had with Beatrice, which many of us had. Our first love. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I love the T.S. Eliot quote. I had the experience but missed the meaning.
Yeah. Well, right.
And then that was one person said the whole Joyce contemporaries in time Elman quote was he was teaching us how to perceive our own time by reliving that time. This is a question that's rooted in 2 of my film heroes. Their mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Probably both. I mean, you can't say one thing or the other. But just going back to the Joyce, the quote T.S. Eliot about experience versus meaning.
Yeah.
There's so many such good scenes in Proust, Remembrance of Things Past, where his grandmother, this is in the book, he had a very, very close, in the novel, a very, very close relationship with the grandmother.
Yeah.
And then when the grandmother died, he really felt nothing. It was just sort of, he went on with his day. I forget all the details, but I even think he went out drinking that night. I mean, it just wasn't a big event. And it was only, I think, a year later, this is in the novel, a year later that he really had the experience of her death. At t equals 0, nothing.
Yeah.
A year later, interestingly, he just sort of had a tapping on the wall that reminded him, blah 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 blah. And then he was better. He was a weird person, but also a weird character in the book. He was confined to his bed for 2 weeks or something. He couldn't get out of bed. Everything's exaggerated. But yeah, that's when he had the experience. The meaning. He had the experience of her death early, but he had the meaning a year later.
Yeah, it had to come around or something. Some people can't feel the grief right away, or It's maybe their defense mechanism.
Right. Right.
But Bill, I know it's both on the vehicle and self-expression. Many people say that. Most people say it is self-expression. One lady says great art is, uh, well, the basic, is more a muse or a vehicle. In fact, Dante said he prayed
Right.
to the divine to as his muse. But the question is, can art making be egoless?
I think that's sort of like when you're in the zone.
Yeah,
I'm sort of more familiar with, as I mentioned, I wish I had more aesthetic skills or aesthetic sensibilities. I try very hard to have aesthetic sensibilities, but I just don't have them I don't have them to my satisfaction. Anyway, but I have sort of more with sports.
yeah,
And, people write about it, and I've experienced it. When you're sort of in the zone,
yeah,
that's sort of like an out of body egolist
yeah,
experience. So I think most definitely artists, oh,
yeah,
probably anybody, a programmer. I don't think this is unique to artist. I think
yeah,
anybody can sort of just get really, you lose yourself,
yeah.
you know.
That's good. Yeah, this one woman said great art is egoless, and another one said great art has to be egoless. But it is funny because the word ego is back to the language game. It carries so much baggage. So people are wondering, you mean egotistical?
Right.
So what do you think your hunch, Bill? What was the motive of the cave artist? Their, you know, you know, what was behind their motive?
All right. So I'll tell you a funny story about my aesthetic insensitivity, and then we'll get to your
Yeah,
question, but maybe.
please.
So I'm revealing a little too much about my personality. So we were in uh, Escalante's National Park. I think that's how you say it. And so we went on this day hike, and we went to visit somewhere's the cave art. I guess it's sort of on the tourist trek.
Yeah,
And so we walked up there and we saw this cave art, which I don't want to say it. It's not very complex.
yeah,
Cave art. Okay, it's kind of simple.
yeah,
And so my reaction, and crudely I verbalized this, I said, probably some kids did that, and kids did this, and the parents should have smacked them and said, you're polluting the wall.
yeah.
Yes, that shows intense insensitivity. So what was behind it? I don't know. I have such a hard time jumping back into history because we want to romanticize it.
Yes.
And I don't know. They probably. I don't have anything deep or profound. I can't say anything profound. I
Well,
mean, I
Bill,
can make up some bullshit, but
but hold on a second. It's amazing what you said because a lot of people saw the Herzog cave art film, Forgotten Dreams, whatever it's called, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, and it's a good film on cave art. And he based it on a New Yorker article. And the New Yorker article basically said the cave artists invented like 15 things, scaffolding, and they invented like what is spray paint. You'd put your hand there and you put a pigment and you blow it and it leaves the image of the outline of the hand.
yeah.
So the uh, life expectancy of people then was 15 years old. So the people who invented art were teenage taggers. Exactly what you said. So it was exactly your hunch. These were like, what are you doing? You're just, I like what was the motive of the cave artists? As one guy said, to keep people in the cave.
Yeah.
I always say, so he give you an excuse to serve wine and
Yes.
crackers and cheese. Come over to my cave and look at my cave art.
Yeah. I was just thinking, now these things I would never say. Well, I guess I am saying in public, probably a bigger audience than I would ever think. And I'm just sort of joking. But they were sort of marking my spot. Okay. Like if you stick some ID in it, because we did see some really pretty cool cave art. I think, if I recall correctly, I think we had to climb on top of a ladder.
Yeah.
These caves were built into the walls, into the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
I think we had to climb. I mean, people put a lot of, and they stored food there. That was because to keep it away from animals. So they put a lot of work in that. And then there was some cave art in there. And I'm thinking maybe the cave art was just like how you kind of sign your name. You said, "This is mine. Don't come into this cave. This is my food." They were marking their spot. I don't
That's
know.
Kilgore was here. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's not joking. That's behind every joke, there's a grievance, or behind every joke, there's an epiphany. It's like that's the beauty of joking and telling things. Like, the next question is T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, very narrative, I guess. Very narrative.
Narrative.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm, I'm taking a poetry class now. I'm always doing continuing education stuff as an adult. There are no tests, and I've never understood poetry. It's never clicked with me. Um, and I finally am starting to click with it. And I don't think in terms of poetry, but
Yeah.
I really appreciate people who do. But mine is pretty straight narrative.
No, I
Yeah.
like that, because the other one is, I love T.S. Eliot saying, and I never really consumed his poems, and I know it's important, proof rock and
Yeah.
in Four Quartets, but he said poetry can communicate before it's understood.
Right.
So that's what music is. That's what, the stream of consciousness. So is perception reality?
Well, um, again, there are always so many different ways of answering that question. One is strictly from the phenomenological point of view. So the pencil in water, in a cup of water, it appears bent.
Yeah.
So you do experience a bent pencil,
Yeah.
but it really isn't. And I remember having this talk with someone who was very much into, she was sort of into politics, but office politics. And she said perception is reality. And I said, if you really believe that, then you would believe the pencil is bent. So she didn't like that. But yeah, I mean, the pencil is bent. So that's one sense that your perception is reality. There's another sense that you kind of know the pencil is not bent.
Yeah.
So it's
It's a
kind
good
of,
example. Really
it's,
good example, Bill. Tell me one major element of your creativeness, your research, who Bill is, that's changed, and one major element that stayed the same.
oh my gosh. Well, my, my career was always pretty analytic.
Yeah.
But when I retired, it's like a different half of my brain lit up.
Yeah.
It was just really interesting. So I mentioned I started at the piano. That was a little later. I started working on these books, and they do have an element of creativity. I mean, they just do.
Yeah.
Um, sorry. So your question,
Well, one thing you answered it. One thing that stayed the same was that you were analytical, but then what changed um is it's sort of like you learned how to integrate your left and right hemispheres.
yes, and I've
You know,
always wanted to like hang out with the greats.
yeah,
Okay, so um, I did Joyce, Wagner, Joyce, and Ulysses, and Proust.
Bruce, yeah,
They're kind of pretty hot shots. Then Dante, kind of a pretty hot shot.
yeah,
And now I'm doing time, so I'm spending time with well, many people, but Isaac Newton, reading his
yeah,
papers, Einstein, and these are kind of the big wigs. So
yeah,
that's the research arm of it. Um, but the creative arm is like I'm reading these people
yeah.
and then writing about them, synthesizing them. So what stayed the same was wanting to be with the big players. I'm not a
Yeah.
big player. I'm not kidding myself. Wanting to be with the big players, um, but also doing research of them.
Yeah. Well, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I think a weakness is, again, this starts to become psychoanalytic, and this has come up. I never really felt that I was creative.
Yeah.
and and now writing these books, starting to do music, I think is channeling that weakness. Well, even this podcast, I would never have thought that I'd be talking about this stuff. Um, so weakness is I haven't been good at public speaking, and this is kind of public speaking, not totally, but that was a weakness which I've. Oh, I know. So I've had friends over when I first started taking the piano lessons. I had friends over, and I had stage fright. I mean,
Yeah.
serious stage fright. Like my arms, just even thinking about it, my arms would get all wobbly. And that was a weakness. So I've just worked at overcoming that weakness. And now, for better or worse, and from my friend's perspective, when they come over, I'll play a little piece for 2 minutes. And I
Beautiful.
have overcome that weakness. So
That's good, Bill. You learned how to do that. That's because I watched your lecture on YouTube and I found it very insightful. And I can see, you've learned how to do public speaking. This is the big question is what's the difference between art and science?
oh, I don't think. I mean, technically there's differences, but I think in terms of the human creative process, they're not very different. Well, it's just different skill set. Um, I don't think an artist can do, can go into a lab or go into solve high mathematical equations and draw inferences from them. And I don't think a physicist could go into a canvas and, I mean, there may be some, and paint, but they're both very creative. Just people's brains are just structured differently. Which brings me to a topic that really gets me mad. All this STEM stuff. I don't know if I had mentioned this before, but I think the biggest, most terrible thing people can do is go into a field that they don't want to be in, but they're pressured. And
Yeah.
STEM is that you have all these people going to science, technology, STE, engineering, and math. They're just going into it for the money, and they're not very good at it. They're not going to be happy, and they're not going to be good employees. So those people, and Dante has this really. I wish I had the book with me. And the question is, how come things screw up in society? And Dante does it in a poetic form. If we had more time, I could find it because he does it so well. Oh, because it's his great grandfather, Cacciaguida.
Yeah.
I know this shit. Sorry, I know this stuff. He says the problem is that people who should be, what does he say? I don't know, people who should be priests are made to become warriors, and people, all these things. You're made to become something that you're really not designed to do.
Yeah.
But I would say, both are. There's not. I mean, there's differences. Okay, one solves equations, other paints, it does music, but I think intrinsically they're very, very similar. There's a creative process.
It's really good. Jean Cocteau said, "Art is science made clear." But here's one that McLuhan said that's funny because it goes into your time realm in history. When we push our paradigms back, we get history. When we push them forward, we get science.
Oh, well, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious, you're on Chomsky. We learn more about ourselves from literature than from science.
Oh, learn about ourselves. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
I mean, because literature is delving into the personality, delving into the. I almost want to say, your unconscious.
Yeah.
Whereas science doesn't do that.
Yeah. Utah Phillips, a great folk singer, said, "Anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?"
Okay, so on your, you had a podcast recently that I was listening to earlier today, and you asked the person, and I think you asked me this one too, are you more afraid of
new ideas or old ideas?
New ideas.
Yeah.
And I think when I answered the question several months ago, and she answered, she said she's more afraid of old ideas because instead of new ideas.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about that. And then she mentioned feminism and civil rights, and that's all the normal stuff. But you have a lot of new ideas. Again, I don't want to sound terrible or anything, but white supremacists or very religious people. Those kind of a new. Now you can say they have roots in old ideas, but they have emerged again as kind of the contemporary new ideas. So those new ideas are pretty horrible, whereas older ideas are, like the '60s ideas were really nice, right? And those are old ideas. I mean, I would still say I'm afraid of old ideas because I just see them as worse. But many new, like if Trump gets into office, these ideas are going to be pretty horrible. Yes, please. I know.
Okay, this is good, Bill. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Oh, well, okay, if it's when it's okay on a personal level, when it's used for self-improvement. On a public level, it probably should be geared in a different way. But I can see on a personal level, you could get angry with yourself for making the same mistake. With self-improvement, that's okay.
What's the difference between rights and responsibilities?
Oh, that's a good one too. Rights. Oh, so rights have gone back to the things I read a billion years ago. Rights have to do with what I'm entitled to. So rights are rights are over others. I have a right to this thing. Whereas responsibility is what duties do I have to others? So they're very, very different. They're kind of opposites of the same coin, I guess.
Yeah.
Rights are, I don't want to say rights are selfish, but rights come from me for what I want. Responsibilities is how I help, what I owe others. Rights are what you owe me. Responsibility is what I owe others. Maybe
that's good. I owe others.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I'm responsible to, I don't know, whatever. Yeah, but yeah, I like that. I never thought of that before. This is good. I think about things I hadn't thought about.
No, I appreciate it, Bill, because back to the who's entitled to make the rules, I forgot to add this, that the word freedom is exactly what Utah Phillips said. Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. The word freedom etymologically means the same thing, giving oneself one's own laws.
Right.
So the basic question is what does freedom mean to you now? Because I'll set it up with two quotes of these literature people, T.S. Eliot. Freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation. And then just about your new ideas resonating, McLuhan said, how are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads in the invisible teeth of technology, calling the whole thing freedom? So, I'm in a lot of ways, cell phones have freedom and freed us. In a lot of ways, it's not freed us.
Right.
What does freedom mean to you now?
Oh, God. See, I'm not a libertarian at all saying freedom means you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
That means you have no responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you were in a cave, that's what it means. But once you join into a society, just by the very nature of society, you have restrictions on you. And those kind of are good restrictions. Like it's good that people stop at red lights,
Yeah.
It's good that their freedom is curtailed when in traffic. I don't know. Let me take a pass on that. I will.
That's all right. Again, it's not to answer the question, just saying your feelings and thoughts about the subject as a prompt, because this one we've touched on, Bill, and there's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." The comedian Bob Goldthwait morphed it into "You are what you hate." James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve.
Right, sure.
And Louis Buñuel said, "Thank God I'm an atheist."
Yes.
So, I mean, basically, I'm curious your thoughts on this line. I'm not saying you create what you resist. One creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Uh, sure. I often make, in an appropriate context, I say I still carry a lot of the scar tissue from, growing up with a Catholic background, Catholic school. So I have not shed myself of those sort of foundational beliefs of Catholicism. And so, as I said, I refer to it as scar tissue. I can't get rid of it. So, yeah, we do create that, or we carry it along with us.
Yeah.
I would love to if I could get rid of it, but
yeah, well, that's funny because we brought up identity and the search for the self in part one. And Alan Watts says, everybody's trying to figure out who we are, I'm trying to find myself. And he says, if you figure out who you are, you're fucked, man.
yeah, sure.
But we're always in flux, but like you are now, hey, I've had that career, now an analytical career. Now I'm having this career as a researcher and an author. And you kind of define yourself with, we become what we behold, as Blake said. But the one I was curious is both Christian Birdie and McLuhan said identity is the human search. No, violence is the human search for identity.
Wow.
So I'm curious, any thoughts on just finding oneself or self-identity?
I'm sort of an existentialist in that regard. I mean, we have a self insofar as we have our history.
Yeah.
We have our memories. You can't get away from that. But human beings also, I guess this goes back to freedom. We also have an ability to at least chip away at our history.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'll give you an example. So I have some health problems, some serious health problems, and what I discovered was I'm just pretty middle class. My mortality is staring me in my face.
Yeah.
So some people would use that as an opportunity to really do things that they've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
It turns out, and this was sort of a half surprise to me, there's really nothing outlandish that I want to do. Now I count as outlandish as, I don't know, buying a Ferrari. That's a standard, trope. But I really don't want to buy a Ferrari. It's a kind of waste of money. So yeah, I'm dragging along my middle class upbringing.
Yeah.
And I guess I could chip away at that. But it would be very hard. It would be sort of almost artificial. I don't even know how it would. Well, we are going out to a lot nicer restaurants than we have in the past.
Well, Bill, we just got we got a few more questions and a little more time. Not much, but you're anticipating like 3 questions with what you just said. You anticipate exactly. In this one, I might ask you part 1. Can you forget to die?
Well, I've given that thought. And okay, so my brother was over the other day. Very, very few people know that I have this health condition, because I don't want to be defined by it.
Yeah.
it's not like I'm trying to forget. I just don't want people to bring it up all the time. And not that it's such a
Right.
bad thing. I just don't want to be defined by that. But so he said, don't you think about death a lot? As he said something like that. And I said, no, not at all. I'm
Great.
just trying to think about living.
There you go. That's good.
But
That's the
that
power of positive thinking. Why would that's you ever hear that? Oh, that person's dying of AIDS. You're like, you don't say that.
right,
Everybody's dying.
right.
They have it. So you don't, so no, that was good. So these are 5 Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words. 1, who started it all? Good laughing. I'm glad you're laughing.
All right. Well, I mean, so this is unreflective. Just give it the answer. Is
Yeah.
that's what you want?
Yeah.
Oh, I would say Rousseau in his quote that the all this started when the first person said, "This is mine," and everybody believed him. It's something like that. The sort of private property. I think
Private property. I love that. I never had that answer. Thank you. 2, are we going to make it?
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
3, where do we put it?
Oh, okay. I guess when you said, "Oh, we're going to make it," I thought, "Is the Earth going to survive?"
Yeah.
I view it that said, "Oh, so where are we going to put it?" We keep it tucked in time.
Not in time, Time.
Time, yeah, time.
Dude, that's another thing for your book. Listen to the song In Time by Sly Stone.
Oh,
It's one of the greatest songs ever written. The lyrics are wild. And Miles Davis made his band members listen to it over and over for 30 minutes just to say, that's what I want to do.
what's the name of the song?
In Time.
Oh, okay, that's easy enough.
Yeah.
Because the
Okay.
reason I say is that the last chapter I'm going to have poetry on death and aging.
Yeah.
Because move it from the scientific and philosophical about time to the very personal. Because some people I've asked, they say time is for me, them speaking, it's tied to mortality.
Yeah.
So they make it a personal rather than abstract.
No, I have a whole page of note of quotes on that on death and that question. Can you forget to die? Zizek, memento mori. Remember that you have to die. Um, and then there's an old song that goes, "Let not the dead forgotten lie, least living men forget to die." And Jean Baudelaire says, "What if we were to forget to die?" See, the problem is you handle that question well. When I say that to most people, can you forget to die? They go, "What do you mean? Can I forget that we're going to die?" I go, "No, you can take the question literally or metaphorically."
Right.
In the big revelation, the epiphany I had in the last 2 weeks is that if all words are metaphorical, then the word literal is metaphor.
Yeah, right.
Okay, a couple more and we're out of here. If you were walking, oh wait, I didn't finish the Alan Watts. That's right. Okay, no, here's 1, 2, 3.
You
Okay,
did 3.
the fourth Alan Watts. Who's cleaning it up?
Well, sadly, the next generation.
Yeah. 5. Is it serious?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, very good. Okay, here's a couple more and we're out of here, Bill. This is fun. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
This is time to get like on the psychiatrist's couch. This is very good. I would say don't sabotage yourself.
Wow, don't sabotage.
Yeah, have more self-confidence.
Yeah. And how do you find peace of mind?
I enjoy reading.
Yeah.
I just like that.
That's smaller me. Everything ends up in a book. I love that. Books are amazing.
Yeah.
Talking about books, if a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Oh my gosh. Oh. Well, I guess something, and I'll embellish on it. My life as experience.
Oh, nice.
I have friends who have said this. I mean, I have not prompted this. They just sort of say it. I want to experience all that life has to offer. Now, certain things I can't, but as much as I can within my middle class background, I want to. I don't want to not experience stuff that's available to me. So, I mean, things like skydiving, bungee jumping, I don't know, scuba diving. You know, when I think about it, scuba diving, surfing, um, well, reading Plato, Kant, Joyce, Proust, Wagner's music. I mean, I wanted. I'm always amazed at people. I have friends who they have opportunities to do things and they don't,
Yeah.
and I'm always sort of shocked.
Yeah. Well, one thing I see in in the discussions we've had is what my parents did at the end of their lives or towards the end of their lives. They went to all these lectures, all these adult college, learning centers, and they were constantly learning new things and telling me, Jerry, I just learned this. I was like, amazing. So it really inspired me. And if they wanted to, I love that. My Life as Experience. That's the name of your autobiography. The publisher wants to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Oh, oh gosh, this sounds weird, but violets, violet or lilacs.
Oh,
I,
I love both of those.
I really like. I think I really like those in wine.
Oh, that's great. My
Yeah.
my last name means violet.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Like some people would say oak or tar or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
mine is sort of a little different.
Oh, that's a beautiful smell. Okay, if a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh, oh. Well, I'm more sort of more of a dadaist in that. I guess in a very sunny place made out of wax,
Oh, good.
so it would sort of melt.
Okay.
I have no sense of permanence. I'm not kidding myself.
Yeah. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under?
um, Over.
Yeah. Well, funny, Bill, because the patent is 100 years old and it's over. 99% people say over, but the people who say under have their reasons. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
I mean, are those two things or one thing?
Yeah, no, one thing that you never had and you never want, but it's good. Something good you never had, but you never want it.
I don't know if this is going into adolescent fantasy, but I think I would have liked to have been in an orgy.
Right. You never had an orgy, you never want it, but it's probably good.
Well, the thing is about not wanting it. Those are contradictory.
That's exactly it. It is a contradictory. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want it. What are the what are
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
something good I've never had but never wanted it? I see. I get it. I get it. Um, I got to think about that. I'm gonna jot it down.
No, I'll tell you. One guy said kids, like he never had kids.
Oh,
He knows they're good, but he never wants kids. So I
I see.
mean, when my friend asked Johnny Carson the same question, and he says, "I don't know. When you figure it out, tell me. I want to know."
Yeah. I didn't want.
Okay, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I know that was one of the first things in your book.
That's how we started. You asked
Yes.
the nurse in the waiting room.
Oh yes, so you remember. Well, I asked these guys at brunch today about that.
Oh my God.
Same type of thing. Same type of thing. And this is something I do when I don't know how I would answer, I deflect it back to the person. So
Yeah.
I raised that question, they kind of couldn't come up with anything,
Yeah,
and then the subject changed. Um, God damn, and of course, one of the answers isn't you duck out of the way
right.
because that's sort of not the really purpose of the. Uh, oh man,
Well, Bill, it's sort of a metaphor for life. I learned it
yes,
from a
yes.
really wise friend of mine who was like an altacocker, coming like Damien Packard. He's hung out on the Venice Boardwalk. And I looked up to him, but it is a funny question. My wife gets pissed when I ask people it. But basically, I'll tell you one answer I got that's amazing. And I've gotten a lot of amazing answers to it.
I,
But
I have
one,
I have my answer, but go on with yours. I won't
no,
change it.
no, no, go with yours next, and then I'll tell you.
I would just take it, sort of hoping I could be mistaken.
Yeah, take
Yeah.
it. This woman said, I'd take the velocity of the speed of the bag of shit and use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. And
Well, that's great.
I said, do you know that is Edgar Allan Poe's Descent into the Maelstrom short story?
Yeah.
The guy's boat gets smushed by the waves. It's
Yeah.
going down in the whirlpool, and he watches the pattern of the broken
Yeah.
boat parts and uses his way to swoosh it out.
That's
But
very
I got the other one was a great artist. I asked him, he said, what would you do? He said, cry.
Oh well.
So, I mean, it is like a metaphor. Is that what
Right.
life is? No, life is more exciting than that. But if you could look at that, what's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Oh, I thought that was going to go a different way. I think the cultural shift is not good.
Yeah.
Um, oh, uh, maybe it's because of the election, but I see everything as so negative.
Yeah.
Um, uh, there has to be something good that is happening in the cultural shift. um, I don't know. I just am sort of down right now. Um, well, the cultural shift. I mean, so much depends on November 4th or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So much depends on that in the United States.
Yeah.
Ask me in 3 weeks or whatever.
Okay, I will. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Um, for me, it's a curiosity about um, confronting what probably would be a painful last couple of months or something like that.
Yeah.
How I handle that.
Yeah. How has writing shaped your behavior? Writing your
Oh,
books,
yeah,
researching and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
writing. Yeah.
Oh my God, totally. Now I just don't read things or see or hear things or see things just for fun or educational. I see it as how I can fit it into something.
Yeah.
So for example, in this poetry class I'm taking, which is on death or aging, I don't even remember what the title is. We read a poem by Tennyson called Ulysses.
Yeah.
And in Dante, Ulysses is a tragic figure.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas this poem he's a hero. He wants to. He comes home. He sees his wife. He says, "Okay, this is okay, but I'm out of here. I want to explore the world." In Dante, when he goes out and explores the world, he dies. I mean, and he's in hell. So now I got a footnote. So I'm gonna throw that in a footnote in the Dante book.
That's I
So
do that all the time now. Everything I read and see is like, oh, how could I use this in my
right,
writing? And that what you said taught me about the Tennyson poem is that's the main thing McLuhan learned from Joyce. How do you turn a breakdown into a breakthrough? How do
yeah,
you turn a rejection into a redirection?
right.
Yeah. Okay, two more. We're out of here. This is Thornton Wilder. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 3 hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
I think in like my writing, under the rubric of research,
Yeah.
I'm really exposing myself.
Yes.
So, well, because the Dante book, the time is more. Okay, let's just take the Dante book. I know I should probably stick with Joyce of Proust, but that's sort of what's jumping into my head. There are a lot of takes I could have done. There are a million takes one can do with Dante other than just tell the story. I mean, I think a good author will have a theme. Okay, so therefore you leave out a lot of other explanations and accounts. And so when I pick the theme of love, I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
That's very important to me. In the Joyce, in the Wagner, Joyce, and Proust book, I'm talking about with the leitmotifs. It's how an event any particular event will wash over your whole experience, past, present, and future, which is sort of one of my things that no experience is in isolation.
Yeah.
You sort of carry your history with you.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about myself as much as just Joyce, Wagner, Joyce, and Proust.
Yeah. That's good, Bill. Yeah, that's really important. What gives you the most optimism?
The most okay. So my wife is going to outlast me, and I feel really very optimistic that she. And I'm working very hard on this too, to make her continuing to live a very good, productive, happy life.
Yeah.
After that's very important to me.
Beautiful. The first question I asked in part one is what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. The last question I asked is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. What gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people. It's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Bill. Thank you so much for your time and energy. This is really
Thank you.
delightful, and I learned a lot. I thank you.
I think the learning was how much I learned. So thank you,
Bill. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Perfect. You know where I am. All right.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Bye.